Welcome to our WP Educates podcast. This is Danielle Reynolds, and I lead our business development efforts here at Whitley Penn, along with hosting our Develop podcast. We had the opportunity to host a series of events highlighting the nonprofit industry and how different service lines work to add value. We have recorded those conversations to make them easily available to you. This episode focuses on our wealth management services group with speaker and partner Shane Miller. Listen in as we highlight WPWealth and discuss how this group works with nonprofit organizations, identifies tax-saving solutions, works with donor-advised funds, and how they connect clients to charitable organizations. We hope this episode provides you value, and please follow up with any questions.
Awesome. Thank you, Danielle. Good morning, everyone. I'm so glad that you are able to join us for this last installment in our series. I'm here with fellow Horned Frog and good friend Shane Miller. Shane, are you getting to go to any of the games this weekend for TCU?
Man, I wish. I just saw Jeremiah, the athletic director, post something that they're completely sold out for the Super Regional.
Yeah.
And exciting season we're having.
Yeah, we've had a great year as TCU fans for sure. Well, Shane, besides being a Horned Frog, do you want to do a little bit more intro about yourself?
Sure, absolutely. And Emily and I were talking earlier. I've got the extra strong coffee today because I'm a new father for the second time around. I got two little boys. My newest addition, Max, was born May 12th. And so we're learning how to sleep and get him a little bit more on a schedule. And my wife, Brighton, is a family practice physician with Baylor Scott & White. We started dating in 8th grade, and we were together for 10 years before we got married. And now we're going on 12 years of marriage. So I've actually been with her longer than I've been without her. And I've been with Whitley Penn in the wealth group for, 10 years now. And so it was, the firm's grown a lot. When I first started here, I think we had, 5-6 people in the wealth group, and we had 2 office locations. And now fast forward, we've got $1 billion of assets under management. We just added a new person to the team yesterday. So we're growing in our ability to serve all of the office locations and all the clients of the firm. And I'm a CFP. I'm also a CRPS, Chartered Retirement Plan Specialist. And I've been doing comprehensive wealth management and financial planning at least since 2010. And so yeah, that's a little bit about me. And we are so fortunate to be a part of Whitley Penn for all the reasons Danielle mentioned. Just the quality of professionals that we have, I think, really is additive to what we can do as in serving clients.
That's great. And we're lucky to have you guys too. So for those who don't know, can you sort of walk us through what someone in the wealth group really does? And I think that's both serving Whitley Penn clients and then serving clients that maybe Whitley Penn doesn't have besides their relationship with you.
Yeah. So we are a comprehensive wealth planning practice, and being born out of a tax and consulting shop, I think that we have maybe a little bit different perspective than some of the other folks that do wealth planning in the industry. Because of the high level of coordination that we have with the other service lines, it allows us to expand the conversation and meet their needs that typically are more siloed, where you have, a different relationship for each piece. But the wealth group, some of the specific, I would say, deliverables are, we do qualified plans, design and implementing plans, both defined contribution and defined benefit plans. We do investment management, and we actually put together financial plans that are goals based, which I think is also a little bit different, really focusing on how do we drive a high probability of success rather than, being solely focused on, market environment. And we do pretty deep estate planning. We do life insurance. I guess the list is probably shorter if we said the things we didn't do. I think if it has to do with money or running a business, we probably do it. We do a lot of transaction planning and charitable planning, which we'll touch on in more detail here in a bit. But really being tip of the spear in terms of advice and guiding our clients to good outcomes.
So how do you specifically work with nonprofit organizations? We've talked about this a little bit, but there's so many different ways you touch the work with nonprofits that I think it would be great for you to highlight all of that.
In nonprofit organizations are unique, right? I mean, they have different considerations than your typical for-profit business. And so the services that we provide them are specialized. And so that could be anything from setting up 403B for the participants in the organization. And we also help invest in endowment money, which that is, in the environment that we've been in last year, specifically with rising interest rates, that can be really tricky. And you want to make sure that you're continuing to serve the mission of that organization without exposing them to too much volatility. And so some of the things that we do to help control that, maybe using buffer ETFs, which just a quick explanation of what that is. So still want to participate in the market, still have the goal of outpacing inflation, want money to be available to support the mission of the organization. Something like a buffer ETF can be useful because you can, for example, buy something like the S&P 500 is your reference asset. And you can get a 15% downside protection depending on which one we're going to use, so that if the S&P went down 16%, you'd lose 1%. But you can still participate in the upside. You're giving up a little bit of upside for that protection, but maybe it's a 15% cap. So it allows you to have a little bit of a smoother ride. And that protective nature is really, really important in managing those funds, because there's a lot of people that have say-so in those decisions. And so the last thing you want is a board that's unhappy with how that's being managed. And so I think you have to be really, really prudent and understand what's important to the organization. And the other thing that I think we do well is we help organizations raise money. I think that talking to them about what their goals are and aligning people that have interest in volunteering, encouraging attendance to the various events, serving on boards ourselves. And so I think, those are some of the ways, but I think that it's really whatever their needs are, and we can be a resource to them, but being mindful that nonprofits are just, a different, they have unique considerations.
For sure. That's great. I think one of the things in talking with you before that I've really appreciated is your group is very invested in giving back and serving in the community and really participating both as board members, but also as fundraisers for several organizations. And I think that's just such a phenomenal way that you are choosing to expand your work with nonprofits and do something really impactful in the community.
Yeah.
So let's walk through now just some of the success stories that you have experienced working with nonprofit organizations here at Whitley Penn.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I've served on a couple of boards. I continue to serve on a couple of boards, and have done some personal fundraising. But I think it's just part of the fabric of Whitley Penn's character to be involved in the communities that we serve, and support the organizations in those communities. So some of the really fun success stories is being able to talk with organizations and see their visions being fulfilled, and us supporting them through planning. And then I personally hosted a pickleball tournament earlier this year, had some auction items, and had some fun doing it. And so I think that doing the actual work, but also that translating into outside of work, really I think is part of what makes Whitley Penn special. That the follow through of we're not just here to do the number stuff. We're very good at the number stuff, but I think that in addition to that, it's a service organization, and that expands beyond what we're doing in the office.
For sure. So what value do you think that the group provides, since most of our organizations tend not to pay tax?
Well, one of the interesting things that we get to do, which is maybe not directly communicated to nonprofit organizations, is we do a tremendous amount of charitable planning, gift planning.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of consolidation across all industries happening right now. And so for example, if a client's going through a transaction that's going to be the highest income period of their life, one of the ways that we can help with tax planning is by way of charitable giving. And so a lot of these gifts make their way to the organizations that Whitley Penn serves. And so some of the ideas, or more utilized ideas, include charitable gift funds, or sometimes they'll be called donor advised funds, where let's say you gave $10,000 a year to charity. Well, we've got this higher tax burden in a specific year, so maybe they decide to give $100,000. And so we'll do a couple of things. So number one, it's a timing thing, because we want to drive deduction in a specific year. But then the other part of it is giving a better gift. So rather than giving cash, we'll often look to donate appreciated securities. And by doing that, you get the deduction, you avoid capital gains tax, and then that money is available to be distributed to the charities over their lifetime. And so I think that helps steady the cash flow of the nonprofit organization as well, because if they got $100,000 check in 1 year and then nothing the preceding years, that could be disruptive if they're anticipating those funds to continue to flow in. And so I think that that's a way that we probably support in an indirect way a lot of the organizations that work with the firm.
Yeah, I know you and I have specifically worked with a client in wealth who relocated to the area and was looking to get plugged into this charitable community. And we were able to make a couple of introductions that I hope were really helpful for her to kind of decide where she wanted to invest her charitable dollars. And I think one of the big things that I really hope becomes clear today for everyone is you may not do just everything with a nonprofit as a client, but you definitely are working to take those clients that are invested in the wealth group and connect them with charitable giving strategies and connect them with good organizations that are doing the work that kind of aligns with the kind of desires I think that your clients want to connect with, whether that's plugging into the healthcare community or plugging into education. You've done a great job of that. And so the service that you're offering is not really just limited to nonprofits, but really kind of almost a matchmaking service for nonprofits.
Yeah. I mean, you get to hear about, when you're having these wealth planning discussions, it's a very, it's, outside of your health, your money is probably one of the things that you think about most.
Mm-hmm.
And where those dollars flow really tells you a lot about people's values, what's important to them. And I was going to mention one other strategy that we use pretty often is qualified charitable gifts. So after you're 70 years old, you've got required minimum distribution starting at 73 now. But once you're 70, you can actually take distributions from like an IRA, and instead of taking that as income, you can direct that to a charity, and you will actually, so it works really well when you get into required minimum distributions where you don't want to add that additional ordinary income burden because you probably have some Social Security and other income flowing in. And so using the qualified charitable gifts really can make an impact, because those folks that are going to be charitable anyways, it's just finding the right way to give that's going to really help them to maybe even further their charitable intent.
That's a great point. So have you worked with any cash flow forecasting for either clients or specifically nonprofits? I'm thinking through, as you mentioned earlier, obviously the market has changed quite a bit over the past few years, and cash flow planning has seemed to become a far more important topic to my nonprofit clients over the past few years.
Absolutely. And there's no better case study than what happened in 2020. When all of the sudden it didn't really matter what your forecast said, there was no money really flowing in. And so I remember working from home with everybody else. Everybody was working from home. And I was talking to some of the leaders of the organizations that I work with, and they're really, really struggling. And so I thought about what could I do from home to help support these organizations. And so actually, Danielle and our marketing department was really helpful in helping us launch WP Cares, which was a series that we did focused on charitable organizations, and talking about, hey, this is a tough time. Fundraising events have really slowed. The ability to volunteer completely stopped. And so can we use that as a platform to highlight these organizations, so that, even during the pandemic, they can operate and continue to serve whatever their mission is. And so, and by the way, anybody who's listening that would like to be featured on that, we'd love to have you. And I think that that's just one of the other ways that, it's not necessarily, we can do the cash flow planning, but I think it expands beyond that. It's a deepening of the relationship because it is so personal.
So I've started getting to interview some nonprofit organizations in the community and feature them on the podcast. It's absolutely free for you to do that. You do not need to be a client of Whitley Penn. And really the whole goal is just getting the opportunity to share your story with our podcast audience. It becomes a great way for us to feature organizations. Most recently, we interviewed Moncrief Cancer and the work they're doing in our community, specifically related to helping patients and families dealing with a cancer diagnosis, is phenomenal. So we got to feature them, and then we're looking forward to re-featuring that podcast in October during Breast Cancer Awareness Month. So it's really our marketing team leveraging their bandwidth to help market you to our community and get your name out there. If you've never done a podcast before, it's not terribly scary. Our marketing team does a really great job of making it as painless as possible. The investment has typically been under 2 hours total, start to finish, for each organization. So if you want to be featured on that, Shane did a great job getting that started, and we're really grateful to him for creatively thinking of a way to serve our community. So we talked about cash flow. Let's talk through some other things that I think come up a lot with nonprofit organizations. I think budgeting is one of the toughest conversations I have each year with clients. As you mentioned earlier, the dip in fundraising activity and now sort of return to fundraising activity has been interesting to work around. Just based on what y'all do, I know that you spend a lot more time budgeting than the average person does. So are there any resources you could provide around budgeting or spending or emergency fund planning that might be helpful?
Yeah. And, some of the conversations that we've been having around that are a result of the environment we're in. When you're fighting very high inflation,
Mm-hmm.
and you haven't had material uptick in available cash, then you really have to tighten the budget. And it's not a fun conversation to have, but I think that there are lots of ways to also take advantage of the new environment we're in. So for example, for well over a decade, your money market yield for nothing. Now you can get a decent yield on money markets. You can, CDs are paying pretty well. You have to consider all of your liquidity constraints with it, but making sure that cash isn't idle is important. And then another thing that really was put into focus this year is regional banks, had a tough time managing the environment. So making sure that you're with the right banking relationship, that you don't have FDIC risk. All of that stuff is important. And I think that the focus was off of that for some time. And, cash in checking accounts swelled. And, which is, you want to have the ability to access and operate. But I think understanding more holistically, what do I really need to operate and what is surplus that needs to be doing something for the inevitable rainy day that comes.
Yeah, I have seen, like you mentioned, sort of that swelling of the cash account. I think accounts that were maybe closer to $500,000 before COVID have gotten up far past the $1 million mark. And it is important to be mindful of those things like the FDIC limits, like you mentioned, but also just at some point, your cash is not working very hard for you. And you've got some different opportunities that I know that there's a lot of things that are not as liquid as cash, but pretty liquid that can help you if you're worried about that operating reserve. So I've also seen sort of an increase, as you mentioned earlier, in different kinds of gifts. So instead of making a cash donation to a tax exempt organization. Somebody is trying to move capital gains off of their tax return into the tax exempt organization that most likely would not be paying tax on any of that appreciation. Can you just walk through any investment strategies or policies that you think are critical for a nonprofit to have? And obviously every story is a little bit different, but any kind of good guidelines for us to work through?
Yeah, so one of the things that we talked about the donor advised fund. One of the things that people tend to ask is, I'm going to donate these appreciated securities, but I kind of like those positions. I still want my money working for me. And there's not, in my mind, I don't know that there's a better way to reset your basis. If you had cash that already you had charitable intent for, that's great. Let's give the securities, avoid the capital gains, get our deduction, and then we can take fresh cash and buy the same exact securities. So we're not losing anything in terms of market momentum. We're not losing our place. We're still allowing the assets to appreciate, but it's just, where does that gift come from? That is just making decision-making wise, it's a better gift to give.
Oh, that's great. So I wanted to, before we go back to the Q&A, is there anything I haven't asked so far that you just think is worth sharing with the audience?
Yeah, I think that if you're in a nonprofit organization and you're a decision maker, the world's throwing a whole lot at you, and I think partnering with people who have perspective on the industry, like you do, you've seen the inner workings of so many different organizations, and you get all these great takeaways that you can relay to other folks through platforms like this and other resources that you have. And so, I think that, just following you and Whitley Penn and WPWealth on LinkedIn, I get so much from that. And then I know that we have, regular postings on our website, on the whitleypenn.com website and WPWealth website. And then, like you said, the podcast, we have the channel WP Talks, and it covers a wide variety of things. We have WP Cares, which is nonprofit specific, but there's a wealth of knowledge on, every topic you can think of if you follow that channel. And, not all of them are super technical either. Some of it's just about personal development, growth. And so I would say that if you're looking for some, really good resources, plugging into those things, it doesn't cost you anything. And if there's topics you want covered, you can email our marketing team or email either of us, and we're happy to find the right person to speak on.
That's great. Yeah, you're right. We're always happy to get fresh ideas for content from people who are reading through the content. So if there is something we're missing, we'd love for you guys to reach out to us. So one question that popped up in the chat that I think is really a valuable question is about insurance. You touched on the fact that y'all work with insurance earlier, but can you dive a little bit deeper into what you guys do specifically?
Yeah. So a couple of things. I would say that we believe that insurance is to cover a risk, and to cover a risk as cheaply as possible. We want to separate the investment aspect of insurance out of it. Investment should be its own thing. Risk mitigation is another thing. And so in working with organizations and individuals, the various risks that we're trying to cover may be premature death. That's something that would put the organization or the family members in a compromising situation. We want to cover that risk. from an estate standpoint, using second and die universal life policy properly owned can help with estate tax. And then a really, really important consideration is buy sell, because it can be, and we've seen it be highly disruptive to a business if all of a sudden somebody who has a specific skill set for serving in a certain capacity is no longer there. Well, first of all, you're grieving because that person was important to you, so you don't just step right back in. And then second of all, being able to get the business back up on its feet is it can really be pretty damaging. And so yes, life insurance, nobody likes insurance premiums, but people do like insurance. Especially if something goes wrong, you don't want it to ever happen, but that's why we plan, right? We just want to make sure that we're prudent if something unforeseen happens.
Yeah. I made the wise decision to invest in pet insurance not that long ago, and have definitely gotten my money's worth out of that investment. So it's been interesting to just kind of see. I never would have thought that you could get pet insurance before, but like you said, it's that minimizing your risk and really creating a low cost strategy for that. So one thing that you and I have talked about quite a bit is really, I think, the development department at any nonprofit could benefit from talking to you when they go out to make asks. I think it's not about just making an ask of, is there any donation you'd like to make today? You can really kind of illustrate the different opportunities for lifetime giving, giving upon passing, all sorts of different things. But I think that development director or the person who's really in that fundraising role is a great person for you to connect with. If you're a nonprofit today who's listening to this, when do you think it's the right time to reach out to just kind of partner with our group, just to kind of work through strategies and talk through where they're at in terms of fundraising and where they want to go?
Yeah. And I think that obviously the sooner you start planning for something, you can lay your roadmap. And the last thing you want to be is directionless in what you're trying to accomplish. And so I think in the way you're going to ask and who you're going to ask is really important, because at the end of the day, if you're asking somebody for a donation or asking them to volunteer, but it doesn't align with their personal values, then it's not a good use of time. And so I think that that's super important, that you really understand the core of why you're asking, and then making it very clear to how this money is going to be used. And there are a lot of resources that both you and I have access to that can give you kind of a peek under the hood as to what's going on within charitable organizations. And those tools can really be helpful in you understanding where that money ends up.
Yeah, right. I agree. So I think what you said about direction is important. It feels like the world changes faster than it's ever changed before, and having that sense of direction with any one of the people we've interviewed during this WP Care series is important. But I think Shane's group does the best job of maybe helping bring money in the door for you. So then you have those other resources that some of the other groups really need to work through with you, whether it's managing risk, like we talked about with our risk advisory group, or that outsourced controller CFO piece that we talked about with our CAS group, or maybe even getting to the point where you really need that financial statement audit.
Yeah.
Before we wrap up today, I wanted to just see if there's any other resources you wanted to share that could benefit our audience, anything that might be relevant, whether or not it's specific to a nonprofit.
Yeah. And, one of the easy things to do is overlook your qualified plan.
Mhm.
What we see is so many folks will set up a plan, and then their organization changes materially,
Mhm.
and it doesn't get reviewed. And so what we found is when we have an opportunity to review those, we can make a pretty material impact in terms of design elements. And I think we're also very aware of cost. And, I think that we were talking about it earlier, budgeting. What are some of the things you can control? If you could lower cost related to a qualified plan, and also position your participants to have a more comfortable retirement. Those are both good things. That helps with retention of your good people as well. And so we don't charge anything to do a review, and we put together pretty clear cost benefit analysis, kind of where you're at, what our plan might look like. And so if that's something that's helpful, we'd, happy to do that. And then, I would say that the best resources just are people. If you have a need, or what's really interesting is so often we talk to somebody and they believe they have this one need, and then through a discovery period, there's 5. And it just creating that awareness because of we're in it every day. And so I would say that, our people's the best resource we have. And so if you've got something on your mind you want to talk about, connect with somebody at Whitley Penn, reach out to Danielle, because she knows everybody, and she'll say this is the right person, and she'll make sure that we're prepared to serve you well. But yeah, I could point you to pamphlets and websites and things like that, but nothing is better than just having a real authentic conversation.
Yeah, you and I kind of walked through that exercise as I was talking through a couple of things that are changing in our life at home. And you've kind of been a great sounding board, but also given me a sense of direction of here's a good starting spot. Let's start there and then let's go here. And that's been really helpful. So just kind of as a recap on the whole series before I kick it back to Danielle, we talked through when an organization might need a financial statement audit, when an organization might benefit from outsourced accounting help. We've talked through our strategic consulting group's work. That ranges from a lot of different things, but if you haven't taken advantage of the employee retention credit, that would be the number one reason to reach out to Danielle today. We've talked through risk advisory's work with IT and with internal controls in specific that I think can be really beneficial. I spoke for our tax group, just kind of talking about the benefit of really having someone analyze that tax return for a variety of reasons, but primarily because it is a public information return. And then last but not least, Shane closed us out today. So if there's any of those resources that you think, gosh, I missed that, earlier in the chat, I saw that our ladies dropped in a link to where you could listen to any of those. But as we mentioned earlier, we are going to do kind of a wrap up email for everyone. I want to thank everybody for taking the time to invest in this with us. We were talking about yesterday in the CAS department training for the month, just how critical it is to invest in learning. And hopefully this has been a beneficial learning series for everybody. So I'm going to kick it back to Danielle. You can wrap us up with some housekeeping items.
Perfect. Thank you, Emily. Yes, to reiterate that, it's been such a great series. And like Shane mentioned, if however you need to get connected to the firm, that is my job, to be a resource to you. So whether it's about any of the topics we've discussed as part of this series, or you need a banker, a lawyer, we want to be a resource to you guys. So please don't hesitate to reach out. But that is it to wrap up our series. We will definitely be in touch, and we hope you guys have a great rest of your day. Thank you so much for joining us.